Hello, listener, and welcome to this preview of our latest Patreon-exclusive episode. To continue the conversation and listen to the full episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Hi, I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode, you know this, you're a patron, you're listening. This is a patron-exclusive, and we're talking about The Talented Mr. Ripley, the 1999 film written and directed by Anthony Minghella, based on the book by Patricia Highsmith. I'm here with everyone. Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
So we're doing something a little fun with this episode, is that we are recording this episode while live streaming it to patrons over on Patreon, to YouTube, that little mechanism. So there's going to be potentially references to the live chat that's happening off to the side. We'll try to give context to listeners if you are not able to watch the video and play it back with chat. But I just thought it'd be a little fun thing. We did this a year or two ago, and it was kind of fun. And so we're bringing it back to see
if it can be really fun.
Okay, so we're talking about Talented Mr. Ripley. And part of the reason that we're talking about it is that there's a new Netflix show out called Ripley, which is a miniseries based on the same book by Patricia Highsmith. I have seen it. Trisha has seen it, and you're going to talk about how you began to see it in just a moment. So I think that'll be an interesting reference point that we can touch on a little bit throughout the episode. But also, I've just been curious to revisit this movie. It was a movie that when it came out, I remember it feeling like everyone was talking about it, and it was like a big deal. I watched it. I think I was too young to get it. I watched it again later. I was a little more able to understand it. And so I think I've just kind of watched it several times and layer by layer built up my understanding and appreciation of it. So watching it again this time was really interesting because I remembered so much more than I expected. And it was just I appreciated it, but also was struck by the weirdness of it. Like my vague memory of even that first watch was, this is kind of a weird movie, and it is kind of a weird movie. So I want to talk about that also. But Trisha, you are a Highsmith fan, I believe, and a Ripley fan. So tell us about The Talented Mr. Ripley and your experience with Ripley.
Where to begin? So I probably saw this movie, and that's what got me into Patricia Highsmith, I want to say. Although now, the moment I say it, I realize that I was into Strangers on a Train before that. And actually, the first book of hers I read was The Tremor of Forgery. So anyway, I don't know. Here I am. But I definitely saw this movie before I read the book. So this movie was my introduction to the character of Tom Ripley, as I think it is for a lot of people. Because it's easily the most mainstream and accessible, or was up until a few weeks ago, version of any of the Ripley books. And so there have actually been 8 movies based on the 5 different Ripley novels. Not every Ripley novel has been adapted into a movie, and no 2 Ripley books have been adapted into movies with the same cast made by the same people. So there's no continuity, or it's really scattershot. It's there have been several movies based on this book, and then 2 movies based on Ripley's game, and 1 movie based on one of the later books. And it's it's all over the place.
That's where Jack Ryan would be if we didn't have 2 Harrison Ford Jack Ryans.
Right. Very similar. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, someone in the chat is mentioning Purple Noon. That is the 60s version with Alain Delon. That's also a French adaptation of this. It's extremely different, but I really like it. And then there's this one. There's a John Malkovich version, which is really interesting, considering, spoilers, he makes a cameo in Ripley the series. And anyway, so all of that to say, I am a Ripley mega fan. I love this character. I absolutely love every one of those books. And I do love this movie. Now that I've seen the miniseries, I do wonder, and basically just to sum up my thoughts, this movie is very much an adaptation of the book. It is not very faithful to the book at all. And it changes the character in a number of ways, and it just changes a lot about how the story unfolds. And so now that I've seen a very faithful adaptation, which I would characterize overall the limited series to be a very faithful adaptation to the book, I'm kind of like, ooh, but maybe I wanted it to be more like the book than it is. But also, it's not trying to be in a lot of ways. Like, they're making real choices to change major things in this book, in this adaptation of the book. So I want to get into all of that, but also just like talk about it as a self-contained thing. And yeah. Oh, and I guess Michael wanted me to mention that I got to go to the Ripley premiere here in LA and saw Dakota Fanning. Like, I happened to walk up as she was getting out of her car, like, and alighting onto the red carpet. And everyone was like, Dakota, Dakota. And she was just looking radiant. And she is wonderful in the new series. And anyway, and Andrew Scott was there too, also looking radiant. But yeah, it was a wonderful way to see the first 3 episodes of the limited series on the big screen. And I have really enjoyed the rest of it too. But this is a very different movie than that. So...
yeah.
Someone in the chat is asking Trisha, Ripley or Bond?
How
to
dare!
which I will respond.
Wow.
If you want to see Ripley as Bond, stay tuned for a forthcoming announcement.
Okay, there we go. But yeah, it's I can't possibly choose between Ripley and Bond. They're 2 very different things. How dare you ask me that?
Indeed.
Epic Tiki, get out of here.
Yeah, I'm very happy that I saw the miniseries, understanding that it's a more faithful adaptation, because I think that'll help us talk about the choices that were made in the movie. Brian, what were your thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, I saw it way back and loved it back in the, 2000, 2001, whenever I saw it, right around the time it came out. Within a couple of years, watched it a couple times, had the DVD and have not watched it since. I also bought the DVD of Ripley's Game, the Walmart $550 bin in 2003. And then in 2023 was getting rid of stuff. And I was like, oh, never watched this one. And then I got rid of it. So I've not seen Ripley's Game, but I owned it for a couple decades. And yeah, rewatching Talented Mr. Ripley was really interesting. It's so 90s. It has this Miramax energy that's so strange, it
Wow,
opens.
I didn't realize there was a Miramax energy until you said that.
Yes.
And it's palpable.
Right,
Wow.
right. It first of all, it opens with the Good Will Hunting shot. It's just like Matt Damon looking at things, and it's kind of refracting around him, and then it's colorful kind of Comic Sans, the Talented Mr. Ripley, and it does all the different adjectives for him and stuff. And then we have the entire opening segment. It's blue. I was like, is something wrong with my screen? Just green. There's a person. And yeah, it is a very strange movie. I'm looking forward to getting into what does he want at any given point, but also I don't mind not knowing because I'm having a good time. And there's really strange structural things, just the choice of when the biggest thing happens is not even the midpoint yet. So then it's we've got a whole nother 90 minutes of movie left where you're that was the thing I was waiting to happen. So now what's the movie now, right? And yeah, so I still really enjoy it, but it did feel a little some of the wind had been taken out of the sails of my adoration for this movie, watching it this time with some distance, and sort of feeling a little bit of the drag in the second half of just being okay, there's the Mrs. Doubtfire sequence, which is a lot of fun, speaking of Good Will Hunting, because make that connection. But there are moments in the second half where I'm just oh yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat. What's gonna happen? And then there are moments where I'm just kind of I don't really know what the dramatic question is right now. I don't know what I'm actually rooting for or not rooting for, or waiting to see what's happening. But still just a very enjoyable movie overall.
Nice. Yeah, I think a lot of that. I'm excited to talk about Ripley as a character and as a protagonist and how he's positioned in this movie. Because I think that relates to a lot of those structural things. And Alex, what about you?
You mentioned, Michael, you'd seen it back maybe in high school and was I don't understand what's going on. I had the same experience, I believe, the first time I watched it, probably in high school, and just kind of zoned out. But I do remember thinking, wait, is this a gay character? Whoa, in a mainstream movie, that's interesting. But yeah, it didn't stick with me. There were definitely scenes and moments that like very much stuck with me, and especially the ending. But I didn't really revisit it until now, honestly. I don't think I've watched it all the way through since like high school, and I loved it. Like, it was the opposite of maybe Brian's experience of like, oh, it's faded with time. This was like, wow, this movie's great. And I was so riveted through so many sequences in a way that I just haven't felt for a while. And I think part of it's just this brilliant Shakespearean orchestration of all of the mistaken identity and all the different players in the game and just all the near misses. That stuff is endlessly entertaining, and this movie just like does it over and over again in different combinations. And I just love that stuff. And we don't get good Shakespearean mistaken identity stories often. It's just kind of not a thing in most movies. So I was riveted. I loved it. And I'm excited to talk about it. And I want to see the miniseries now even more.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I mean, just like the cast also is insane.
Right.
Like,
yes.
Like when the names were popping up at the because I'd forgotten.
And her
like,
and him.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like Matt Damon was in a movie with Kate Blanchett and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Gwyneth Paltrow, like, and they all had scenes. Wait, what? When did that happen? It's amazing. Hope you enjoyed this preview clip. To continue the conversation and listen to the entire episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes.